Hi, everyone. Welcome to ESG Decoded. I'm your host today, Amanda Hsieh. Welcome back to our regular listeners. And if you've just downloaded and you're new to our podcast, thanks for checking us out. I'm excited to be speaking with Jen Singh today. She's a technology executive with more than 15 years of experience in building and scaling innovative businesses at both startup and large corporations. As Advanced Technology Development Centers, ATDC for short, Sustainability Catalyst, she supports early stage companies at the forefront of solving our climate environmental challenges. In her role, she coaches sustainability startups and connects them with the ecosystem resources they need to thrive. Prior to ATDC, Jen co-founded Understory, a global community that enables and accelerates climate and sustainability tech startups through educational resources and events. And she also held a variety of commercial and product management leadership roles. For example, she was at Thomson Reuters, where she founded the digital identity solutions business and was a key member of the applied innovation team. She also serves on the board of Startup in Atlanta and SHRM Atlanta. Both organizations are dedicated to supporting the advancement of entrepreneurs in the metro Atlanta region. Hey, Jen, thanks for joining the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Jen, I was thinking, there's so much to talk about and where to start. I was thinking I'd love to hear a little bit about your background in corporate innovation, hear what's happening at ATDC, and just what more can we do to support startups in this area. But anyways, let's start from the beginning.
Yeah, so I've been in tech for a long time, but I really got my chops in the corporate innovation team at Thomson Reuters. I had the opportunity to start there and it was a really interesting time over 10 years ago when new technologies were really starting to emerge. The early AI technologies, blockchain, predictive analytics, and there was this whole digital transformation happening in corporate. And being in innovation, you get the fun job of trying to figure out how to apply these technologies into a large behemoth corporation. They want to innovate, they want to do new things, but sometimes they don't know where to start. And one of the key learnings that I had while I was there was there's certainly a lot of innovation that happens internally, but there's often a lot of work with other companies outside of the organization. And we found a lot of the early stage innovation that was happening in tech at the time was in the startups. They were a few years ahead, having built really novel solutions, and were really starting to drive significant change in areas that we needed to apply to our business. So I fell in love working with startups. We did a variety of things, whether it was co-creating with them. We also were their customers in some instances, using their solutions to really propel our own innovation. And then in some instances, we even invested or look to acquire these types of technology. And the more I was there and the more I've been in corporates, and then I moved over to a startup for a while, you really see that interplay between the need of large organizations to partner and work with small organizations to drive a lot of change that needs to happen within an organization. And I think the interesting thing that we'll probably dig into a little bit more today is I'm seeing that same parallel again, but rather than digital transformation, it's all about sustainable transformation and bringing new sustainability practices and innovations into large organizations in order to meet net zero goals and achieve all the environmental initiatives that a lot of companies are driving towards these days.
Thank you for sharing a bit about your background. I think it sets it up perfectly to understanding what your role is today and what ATDC Sustainability House is trying to do, which I think is, like you just hinted at, trying to be this partner, this connective tissue. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so ATDC is the state of Georgia's technology incubator. We've been around for over 40 years, helping technology startups grow from idea to a significant business that can help grow the economic landscape for Georgia in particular. We sit at Georgia Tech, the university here in Atlanta, but we really serve entrepreneurs throughout this entire state of Georgia. So we're here with curriculum. We also offer connections as well as additional resources to help our startups continue to grow. I came in and joined the team about 6 months ago. This is actually my 6-month mark. But joined the team because they were building this new vertical focused on sustainability solutions. So helping those entrepreneurs that are creating climate and environmental solutions to help really change the planet and make it a better place. My role as our sustainability catalyst is kind of twofold. One, I spend a lot of my time coaching our startups, helping them with business challenges, helping them think through their strategy and prioritize and plan their milestones so that they can continue to grow. But the other portion of that is they really need access to capital and customers. And so my other role is to be out in the community, meeting different folks who can be those resources and connections that can continue to help these companies grow. And so there's a lot of cultivating our local sustainability ecosystem and building bridges between all the different parties that exist here.
Can you give us some like teasers or highlights of some of the startups and what they're working to solve?
So we have 14 companies in our portfolio right now, and we cover pretty much anything that relates to sustainability. So I'm jumping from startups that are focused on renewable energy to built tech type companies looking at real estate solutions. We have a lot of circular economies companies, as well as water tech. I'm even talking to a new company that's focused on hydrogen and applying that to the automotive sector. So we have some really interesting companies. Some are very early stage, right? They've got an MVP, a prototype, they're just going to market, and they might have 1 or 2 customers. And then we have some later stage startups that have had a lot of initial traction, and they're really starting to scale and accelerate. A really great example that's been a great success story here in the Atlanta market is a company called Cloverly. And basically they're creating the entire digital infrastructure to support the voluntary carbon markets and promote and provide carbon offsets to a variety of different use cases. So very interesting, and it's very exciting to get to work with startups across all these different topics and digging into really hard solutions.
You mentioned there's kind of a couple of things that startups need, right? They need some coaching and mentoring. You're providing that, but there's also the other parts of the ecosystem. You mentioned customers and capital. How can corporates, and I'd love to hear that from you because this is kind of your old, role back, a couple of roles before. What can corporates do to better support, to get involved? What would you advise?
Yes, we work with a lot of different corporates in a variety of different ways. It can be as easy as becoming a mentor to some of our startups. We have, a lot of folks with really great technology ideas, but they don't necessarily have the business acumen or understand how large companies work. So being a mentor, even helping them navigate through large organizations to fine-tune their value proposition, their pitch materials, and help them think about new business models is really, really important at the early stage of these startups. As they start to grow and really figure out their core target market, whose problem they're trying to solve for, how can this technology really be applied, then we're looking for customers. I think some organizations are better suited to become pilot customers, but the only way that small businesses grow is through, driving revenue, right? Finding those customers who can take a bet on an early stage company, or through the capital markets. And so I also work with a lot of venture capital firms who are interested in providing that initial capital and help these companies to continue to grow and scale over time until, they get all that customer acquisition under their belt.
And you mentioned a pilot customer. Not everyone might be a good pilot customer. What's a good one? In my head, I'm thinking it's one that it's really a good kind of open communication, a lot of feedback, but I would love to hear really what makes a good pilot customer.
Well, I think it takes a lot of flexibility and willingness to navigate some of the corporate processes. A lot of times, startups have to iterate and continue to, move their product along. And so having a key stakeholder who's willing to be that internal champion that believes in the solution and wants to continue to see it through all the way through to implementation. There's a lot of times where we get folks who are really excited about implementing a solution and they might pass it off to another team. There might be the requisition or the supply organization that needs to go through the whole contracting process, which can be a little tough for an early stage company to do so. Now, on our side, we're helping through mentorship and helping them navigate those processes. But you also want, a very engaged corporate customer who's willing to kind of handhold and be that one of those first customers to help that initial implementation to be a success.
I think you told me one of the things that you also organize is a climate meetup. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so when I first got into this space, I pivoted from just focusing on emerging tech to being very focused on sustainability and sustainability tech. And I'm very passionate about our local ecosystem in particular, here in Atlanta, here across the state of Georgia, and bringing those parties together. Well, a few years ago, when I first started, there was certainly a lot of activity in the space. And we've seen that increase 100-fold over the last 3 years as sustainability is now the cool kids club. But back then in Atlanta, everything was pretty siloed. You had your corporate sustainability leaders that were all interacting and sharing best practices. You had some of the startups, but they weren't well organized because we didn't have the ATDC sustainability vertical. We didn't have other accelerator programs dedicated to sustainability startups. And then you had a lot of nonprofits and, governmental organizations that were doing great work, but it wasn't all interconnected. You didn't have that mixing and collaboration happening. So I helped found a collaborative event with other stakeholders in the ecosystem called Atlanta Climate Tech at the time. We were hosting events, bringing those different folks from across different verticals together. That has since evolved into other types of events. For example, we host a lot of events at ATDC. There's also, regional partners that we co-host events with and participate as well. So we've seen the ecosystem go very quickly in the course of just 2 to 3 years from a very siloed ecosystem to now one that is highly collaborative. We're willing to, co-host events, share resources, share panelists, and really build those relationships. And I think that's one of the things that I'm really proud about our local ecosystem here is that we are so collaborative. We recognize that we all need to do this together to solve these big, planetary problems that we have out there. And even amongst startups or some of the corporates that may potentially be competitors, you're still seeing a lot of cooperation and collaboration, because I think we all recognize there's more than enough opportunities for us all to be successful in the market.
Thank you for that was going to be my next question. How do you kind of balance out these potential, competitive forces at play? Something that I think a lot about is that this transition is complex, and we need a magical convergence of policy, of finance, of technology, of workforce to come together at the magical time to make these this transformation to a low carbon economy possible. And I think it's really events like this, creating that space for people to come together, to know there's a space where they belong and they can have these discussions. It's so important. Otherwise, we're doing our kind of own thing in our silos, which is great, but it's so much more amplified if we can kind of coordinate and combine forces.
Exactly. And I think there's so many opportunities when you share ideas to kind of take those ideas to the next level, build upon it collaboratively. And the other thing I've been seeing is, we can't solve it all ourselves. That's just not a good use of resources. Even going back to, my corporate innovation days, there were things that we should have done internally ourselves, but there were other, innovations that we should have let other experts handle. And I think now you're seeing that in the same way. And there's so many opportunities for, companies, big and small, to adopt new solutions, to adopt new business models, new ways of working in order to, complete this transition. Whether it's, meeting our carbon net zero goals, or it's driving towards zero waste. I think there's plenty of problems out there where we can all work together and continue to help each other along the way.
What do you hear from corporates or companies as their biggest hesitation or kind of concern about getting involved?
I haven't seen many hesitations. I think right now, talking to a lot of corporations, they've all put these goals out there. And many are now in this next phase where they're trying to figure out their long-term plan to achieve those goals. They've tackled a lot of the low-hanging fruit, but now it's that much more in-depth work that needs to happen. And oftentimes it requires an investment, whether it's upfront or a longer-term relationship into some sort of vendor solution. And so I think right now what we're seeing is not necessarily a hesitation, but either one, a lack of awareness that some of these innovations already exist out there and that they can be easily plugged into their existing business. Or two, it's about trying to figure out and articulate the business case. So we're still trying to figure out the economics associated with some of these implementations and new technologies. It's getting better depending on what type of technology is being implemented. But I think there's still, there's work to be done, one on the startup side, to better tell that story and better build that business case for the corporates. And then I think within the corporates, they are also starting to evolve how they look at the return on investment, whether it's not just a simple financial calculation, but maybe there's other inputs and longer term perspectives to put into that calculation.
What are you seeing or hearing from your VCs? Is it kind of similar to the corporates, or is it different?
Well, fortunately, climate and sustainability tech has been a really hot area within the venture capital space. 2022 was extremely hot. Now, the general VC market has pulled back in general in 2023, just given the uncertainty of the economy, high interest rates. There's been a lot of forces at play. Even so, climate has remained a very investable area. And in many ways, there's more dollars going into climate than in some other areas amongst venture capital. So we're very fortunate right now that, it's a popular area to invest. I will say, there's certainly some areas that have gotten more time and attention Certainly, the types of technologies that have been around longer. So your renewable energy technologies like solar and wind, EVs and EV charging has been a very, very hot area. And now you're starting to see more early stage investment going into those emerging topics. So in built tech is becoming very popular and a highly investable area, especially given all the incentives that are going into, the real estate side with the IRA. We're also seeing a lot more companies start to emerge in the circular economy area, and this is becoming very investable. I think one of the challenges that we see about investing into climate tech startups versus traditional software startups is that a lot of climate startups may have a software component, but there's also a lot of hardware, right? Devices. Maybe it's material science, it's products. And venture capital, at least the majority of venture capital, hasn't always understood how to invest into hard tech as much as that software tech. So that's been one of the challenges that some of my companies have been facing. So we're just trying to reach more of those true climate tech and hardware tech, deep tech focused firms going forward.
Nice. How can our listeners get involved? Our listeners are scattered across the U.S., the world, really. When we looked at last year's Spotify and Wrap, we were surprised to see listeners from really a lot of different countries around the world. But how can our listeners get more involved in supporting sustainability, climate tech startups in their area, wherever they find themselves?
Yeah, I think it's kind of twofold. Most cities and most major hubs or states have some sort of emerging startup ecosystem. And in any of those ecosystems, you're going to find sustainability and climate tech startups. So if it's an area that you're interested in, go seek them out. Google it, find the local center in your area and plug in that respect. Offer to become a mentor, an advisor, or even just make an introduction. Sometimes that goes a very long way. And, opening up your Rolodex can be really helpful. I think for our startups in particular, I'm based in Georgia and certainly cater towards Georgia-based startups. So I would want to put a call out there. If you do want to do business in Georgia, we're a great place to be. So you are welcome to come, be a part of our community and join ATDC. But I would say on top of that, I will say we have a call for mentors and other folks who want to participate with our ecosystem, whether you're in Georgia or beyond. As I mentioned earlier with some of those investors, investors and customers exist throughout the world for these startups. They're not bound to one place in time. So would love to connect you and introduce you to the companies that I'm working with if there's an opportunity for you to get involved.
That's wonderful. Jen, thank you so much for being on our podcast today. I've loved this conversation.
I have too. Thank you so much for having me.